Effects of poverty on work. The effects of poverty on work performance drag down the bottom line for businesses and employees. High turnover in low-wage jobs costs money and lowers productivity, according to a study by the Center for Poverty Research at UC Davis. Families living on limited budgets devote time to figuring out how to meet basic needs rather than deliver consistently excellent service or creative solutions. In order to save our planet for future generations, we need to reduce the effects of poverty on work. Effects of poverty on work in developing countries. Effect of poverty on work in developing countries, specifically sub-Saharan Africa. It covers the history of transition from Marx's views on why people are poor to a move toward modern development economics, which explains that poverty isn't caused by innate inferiority but is the outcome of a set of economic and political processes. Poverty can have a variety of serious effects on work, including malnutrition, exhaustion from inadequate sleep and rest, unsafe working conditions, exploitation and abuse by employers, clients, or customers, physical violence in conflict situations, social isolation and marginalization, inadequate access to education, health care, and financial services, limited or no access to resources, credit, markets, technology, income-generating micro-enterprises, efficient infrastructure, and natural resources, poor quality housing, family disintegration and illness because of poor living conditions, poor environmental conditions, limited mobility due to lack of financial resources for travel expenses. Effects of poverty on work in developed countries. For some people in the developed world, poverty means living without a car or home phones, moving from place to place and scavenging for food. These circumstances are harsh and can create large problems for families. But many people in those same developed countries see poverty as something much different, circumstances that are unpleasant but manageable. They may even say they grew up in poverty but were not poor. Research suggests that poverty is about more than income, material possessions, or living conditions. Whether you're talking about millions of people lacking food and shelter or college students who can't afford a dentist appointment, researchers say a person's power and self-worth are integral to what they experience as poverty. Effects of poverty on home-based workers. Through a series of qualitative interviews with home-based workers in Manila, Philippines, this study explores the ideas that they have about the effects of living in poverty on their identities. The analysis finds that home-based workers feel suppressed by their inability to pursue their dreams and are compelled to endure desperate living conditions. They also have strong feelings of attachment to community and family that keep them tied to poverty. In contrast to their feelings of suppression, home-based workers encounter moments when they experience a sense of empowerment despite their perceived lack of control over work and life circumstances. Effects of poverty on employment. Even though poverty is not as widespread, according to several surveys, the effects of poverty on employment have had negative impacts. People living in poor or unhealthy conditions are less able to commute or relocate for employment, and therefore get fewer opportunities. Mental health problems such as stress and anxiety contribute to lower productivity and out-of-work symptoms and encourage a vicious circle where lack of income leads to lack of access to health care, poor housing, and education. Effects of poverty on good quality jobs. The poverty income effect on good quality jobs is a term used to describe situations in which people within a country that remains unaffected by poverty also feel the effects of it. Another way of putting it is there are certain factors relating to poverty that may limit the potential for getting a good quality job. One of these factors is brain drain, where people with desired skills and education tend to migrate across borders due to their own country's lack of skilled employment. And the other factor is a gender inequality gap, creating the reduction of female participation in the labor force due to unpaid employment. Effects of poverty on work. Effects of poverty on child labor. Poverty is a main driver of child labor. Communities in poverty have no other means to survive and are therefore forced to sell or exploit the children in their communities through child labor. In some countries, legislation like the Child Labor, Prohibition and Regulation Act of 1986 defines that children below 14 years cannot work, but due to lack of enforcement, a large number of children are forced to work for unfair wages to support their families. In 2008, 172 million children aged 5–14 years were engaged in child labor. Poverty is the cause of child labor. For example, parents in poor families might send their children to work so that they can earn money for food, clothing, and school fees. Poverty also weakens children's health, suppresses their education, and puts them at risk of exploitation. Effects of poverty on women labor. The effects of poverty on women labor, in comparison to men labor, are more pronounced. While across the globe women represent half of the population, they make up 3/4 of world's poor and 2/3 of those who suffer from hunger. The effects of poverty on women are numerous and have a major impact on their lives. Most often, women will find multiple areas of their lives impacted. The effects of poverty on women's labor have been detailed by the United Nations in its latest report, which includes the fact that an increasing number are unable to feed themselves and their families. The cost to the world economy of this is as high as $18 trillion a year, but politicians have largely failed to act on this information. Effects of poverty on animal labor. Animal labor is often used to produce many of the goods that poor people consume. Whether used for work or as food, animals play an important role in the lives of individuals who live in poverty. However, studies suggest significant negative effects of poverty on animal labor. The effects of poverty on animal labor are fairly negative. However, there are ways in which some of these effects can be reduced through either changes in management practices, animal genetics, or ration formulation. Poverty is defined as the condition of a person who is poor. It has also been defined as a state marked by, or consisting of, the lack of material possessions.